My father slammed his fist on the mahogany table so hard that even the old chandelier above us rattled. The lawyer froze mid-sentence. My younger brother Anthony leaned back with a smug grin, arms folded, as if he'd been waiting for the explosion. My mother wouldn't even look at me. And I stood up calmly and pushed back my chair. "I'm done," I said. "You can keep your legacy. I won't be part of this circus. You ungrateful little," my dad bellowed, pointing at me across the table. His voice cracked, more from rage than age. "After everything we've done for you." "Exactly," I whispered. "Everything you did. Nothing for me." And I walked out. Just like that. Hey Reddit. I know what you're probably thinking. Who walks out in the middle of a will reading? I mean, those are supposed to be somber, sacred moments, right? Families come together to mourn, to remember, to honor the legacy of someone who mattered. But not mine. Ours wasn't about memory. It was about money, control, manipulation, and me? I was just a pawn. Again. So let me ask you something. What would you do if your father expected you to sit quietly while he handed your life's worth to someone else? Again. What if the same people who bled you dry your whole life suddenly wanted to smile, hold hands, and call it family? This isn't one of those stories where everything works out in the end because someone had a change of heart. I didn't walk out because I was angry. I walked out because I was finished. This was years in the making, decades even. A lifetime of being the responsible one. The good daughter. The fixer. The one who put everyone else first. But that day was mine. If you've ever felt like the black sheep in your family, the one expected to carry the weight, clean the messes, make the sacrifices, then you might just see yourself in this story. So stick around. Because this isn't just about walking away from a table. It's about finally standing up at it. This is HD Reddit Stories. If you're into true stories that hit deep, twist hard, and make you think twice about trust and blood ties, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You're going to want to see how this one ends. Because they didn't just want my help. They expected my sacrifice. Growing up, I learned early that in our house, silence was safety and obedience was survival. My dad ruled our family like a CEO rules a crumbling company. Tight grip, no room for dissent, and if something failed, it was never his fault. It was mine. My younger brother Anthony was the golden child. He could do no wrong. If he got in a fight at school, I was blamed for not raising him better. If he broke something valuable, my allowance was docked to replace it. When he dropped out of college for the third time, my father looked me dead in the eye and asked why I hadn't encouraged him more. I was 19. But I didn't push back. Not then. Because I was taught to sacrifice. Taught that good daughters shoulder responsibility without complaint. So I picked up part-time jobs during college to help cover Anthony's temporary housing. I skipped applying to the grad school I wanted because my parents said it wasn't the right time. Anthony needed support. I was the reliable one, the strong one, the selfless one. They wore that label like a compliment, but it felt more like a muzzle. At 24, I moved back home temporarily to help take care of my mom after a surgery. Temporary turned into 2 years. During that time, I cooked, cleaned, managed bills, and helped organize my dad's floundering real estate paperwork. I caught a major accounting error that could have cost him thousands. Did he thank me? No. He told me, "That's what you're supposed to do. Your family." Meanwhile, Anthony bought a luxury car with money my dad co-signed for, then defaulted on the payments. My dad blamed the dealership. When Anthony got caught using my mom's credit card for online gambling, Dad said, "He's just going through a rough patch. Don't be so judgmental." And every time I tried to raise a boundary or suggest some accountability, my father snapped. "This is not up for debate. I make the decisions here." My mother sat quietly during those moments, sometimes nodding, sometimes avoiding my gaze, but never speaking up. I used to wonder if she agreed with him, or if she had just been ground down into someone who no longer recognized injustice unless it hit her directly. The tipping point came the year I turned 30. I had finally moved out, taken a risk, and started a small digital consulting business. I was working with startups, helping them build their brand, slowly building a name for myself. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. One afternoon, my father called, casually suggesting I take out a loan under my name to help Anthony launch a media company. I asked what kind of business plan he had. my father scoffed. He doesn't need a plan. He has vision. He just needs someone who believes in him. Like you? I laughed. Not politely, genuinely. Then I said no. It was the first time I outright denied one of my dad's demands. He hung up on me. That night, my mother called and pleaded with me to reconsider. He's your brother, she said, as if that was some eternal moral contract I could never break. I told her, gently, that I was done being the family's emotional and financial crutch. That conversation ended with her crying and whispering, I just don't want to lose you. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't the one walking away. They were the ones pushing me out, every time they chose Anthony over me, every time they asked for more without acknowledging what had already been given. 6 months passed. I kept building my business. I stopped answering every call. I didn't go home for Thanksgiving. I skipped Christmas. The silence was terrifying, but also peaceful. Then, one Friday afternoon, I got an email from a family lawyer, Mr. Redmond, asking me to attend a family will reading. My heart stopped. I thought someone had died. But when I called, Mr. Redmond calmly explained that my father, despite being alive and relatively healthy, had decided to finalize and formalize his will. He wanted all beneficiaries present. It wasn't an emergency, just a matter of closure. Closure. That was rich. Still, I showed up. I wore a simple navy dress, tied my hair back, and brought no expectations. If anything, I came to see how far they were willing to go to erase me. And I was not disappointed. The room was tense from the moment I walked in. Anthony was already seated, looking like he was posing for a magazine shoot, pressed suit, obnoxious watch, smug smile. My parents sat opposite him. My mother offered a stiff nod. My father didn't look up. The lawyer greeted me with a hesitant smile, then cleared his throat and began. The first few pages were standard formalities: debts, property evaluations, investment disclosures. Then came the beneficiaries. To Anthony Caldwell, my beloved son, I leave all real estate holdings, vehicles, and investment accounts, in recognition of his long-standing support and commitment to family continuity. To my daughter, I leave, my father paused here, leaning forward to look me in the eye. To my daughter, he continued, I leave a sum of $10,000, along with my gratitude for her early assistance in the family's financial organization. That was it. 10 grand and a pat on the head. I didn't speak. I just waited to see if anyone else would. They didn't. My mother blinked rapidly, but stayed silent. Anthony actually raised his eyebrows and smirked. And my father leaned back like a king bestowing his final decree. That's when I stood. I wasn't emotional. I wasn't even angry. I was released. I see, I said softly. Well, thank you for the reminder. And I walked out, ignoring the lawyer's nervous cough, Anthony's chuckle, and the sound of my father's chair scraping behind me. You ungrateful little, he shouted after me, but I was already past the door. That was the day I stopped grieving for the family I'd never had. And the day I started preparing for what came next. I didn't cry on the way home from the will reading. I didn't scream or punch my steering wheel like in the movies. I just drove in silence, hands steady on the wheel, until I reached the edge of town and pulled into the quiet lot behind my office building. A part of me had known this would happen. Maybe I had hoped for some miracle, a flash of remorse, a sign that my years of loyalty hadn't been wasted, but hoping had never worked out well for me. So I let go of the last of it. Right there, under the cold fluorescent light buzzing above the lot, I let go of the idea that they'd ever treat me like I mattered. And then I got to work. It had been 2 years since I started my consulting firm. What began in my tiny apartment with a second-hand laptop and a beat-up printer had grown into a legitimate operation, clients across the country, a small but driven team, and a revenue stream that no one in my family knew existed. They thought I was freelancing, a cute hobby while I figured my life out. I let them think that. It was easier, safer. But now, I had no reason to play small. That night, I pored over every document I had access to. See, when I managed my father's finances during those 2 years at home, I'd kept detailed records. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. His books were a disaster. I organized receipts, identified shady loans, helped refinance a property he was about to lose. And I kept backups. All of it. He never bothered to ask. The next morning, I met with my attorney and laid everything out. "I'm not suing them," I said. "I don't want their money. But I want to use what's mine." He leaned back in his chair, nodding slowly. "Define what's yours." "My expertise. My time. My work. And a couple of properties he thinks he still owns, but technically, he doesn't." Turns out, in one of my father's desperate attempts to keep his sinking business afloat, he had used a commercial property and the family vacation home as collateral on a private bridge loan. The lender defaulted. The note was sold. Quietly. Legally. And that's when I stepped in. My company, through a shell entity for privacy, purchased the note. Clean. Final. Recorded. So while my father strutted around, writing checks from a dwindling account, thinking he was untouchable, I was quietly preparing to take back what I'd helped him keep. 2 weeks later, Anthony applied for a job at a digital marketing firm. Mine. He didn't know. My name wasn't on the website. I used a different surname professionally. But there he was, same smug face, same bloated resume. He had no real skills, no relevant experience, but he dropped my company's name at least 4 times in the interview as if it would impress us. "Heard the founder is a total badass," he told my HR director. She nodded. "Oh, she is. You'll get to meet her in the final round." We scheduled it for a Thursday afternoon. I walked into the conference room, wearing a navy pantsuit and a clipped smile. Anthony looked up from his phone and froze. "Hey," I said, setting down my folder. "Long time no see." He blinked. What is this?" "It's an interview," I replied calmly. "You applied?" "We're evaluating." "I didn't know this was your company." "Of course you didn't," I said, smiling faintly. "You never asked what I do." He sat there in stunned silence as I slid a manila envelope across the table. "Inside is a letter," I said. "Not an offer. Not a rejection either. Just something I thought you and Dad should see." He didn't open it in front of me. He just stared, red creeping up his neck. I didn't wait for him to recover. I stood, adjusted my jacket, and walked out. Inside that envelope was a copy of the foreclosure notice. The family vacation home, the place they'd made so many decisions without me, hosted holidays I wasn't invited to, and pretended I no longer existed in, was no longer theirs. Effective immediately, they had 30 days to vacate or restructure the debt. My company now owned the deed. But that wasn't the only surprise. Also enclosed was a termination of lease letter for the commercial office my father still used for his real estate business. He hadn't paid rent in 4 months. The original owner had quietly sold the building last year. To me. The office would be converted into a co-working space, and he had 15 days to clear out his belongings. I didn't send lawyers. I didn't go public. I just sent certified letters and waited. My phone rang off the hook that weekend. First Anthony. Then my mother. Then Anthony again. Then finally my father. He left a voicemail, low and growling. "You've made your point. Now stop this nonsense before you ruin everything." I didn't reply. A week later, my lawyer received a cease and desist letter, half threat, half desperation. We responded with a breakdown of the transactions, all legal, all documented, and a polite reminder that harassment would not be tolerated. They tried to fight it. But they were out of resources. Out of allies. I wasn't. The final blow came quietly. My team hosted a local networking event in the now vacant commercial space. We invited entrepreneurs, small business owners, students. I stood near the front window, glass of sparkling water in hand, greeting guests. And across the street I saw them. My father, Anthony, and my mother, watching from the sidewalk, huddled together. They didn't come in. They didn't wave. They just stared. I didn't wave either. Because that wasn't a show for them. It was a celebration for me. The girl they underestimated. The woman they tried to erase. The founder who never stopped building. A few weeks passed after the networking event, and I didn't hear another word from them. Not a text, not a voicemail, not a single passive-aggressive message from my mother cloaked in concern. The silence was unsettling at first, like the air just before a summer storm. But the storm never came. Just a quiet, bitter sort of stillness. I suppose they were regrouping, or licking their wounds in private. And me? I kept moving. My company expanded into 2 new cities. We signed our biggest client yet, a national brand that, ironically, had once turned down my father's real estate pitch. I hired more staff, upgraded our HQ, and started a mentorship program for young women breaking into business. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking over my shoulder for approval. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I just lived, breathed, thrived. But peace, it turns out, can make you soft, can lull you into forgetting the ache that came before it. So when my mother showed up at my office without warning one rainy Tuesday afternoon, it took every muscle in my face to keep from reacting. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but in presence. The towering quiet force of my childhood had melted into someone tentative. Eyes darting. Shoulders curled in. "I won't stay long," she said, clutching her purse with both hands like it might carry her back in time. I needed to see you." I offered her a seat. She didn't take it. There was a silence between us thick enough to sink a ship. Then she cleared her throat. "Your father had a mild stroke last week," she said. I blinked. "Is he okay?" "He's recovering. But it scared him." I nodded, waiting. "He asked about you," she added. "Did he?" I said. I wasn't sure if I meant it as a question or an accusation. She looked down. "Not in a nice way." "But he asked?" I should have felt something. Panic. Guilt. Even pity. But I felt nothing. That's how far we drifted. "I came because I wanted you to know," she said quietly. "And to say, I see it now. What you did. What you gave. How we failed you." Her voice broke on that last word. "I don't want anything," she added quickly. "I just wanted to say that to your face before it's too late." I sat back in my chair, hands clasped together. The walls of my office suddenly felt enormous, echoing. I remembered sitting on my childhood bed, clutching textbooks while Anthony screamed downstairs. I remembered scrubbing the kitchen floor after my mother cried herself to sleep. I remembered birthdays spent in the shadow of someone else's meltdown. And now here she was, apologizing in a whisper, decades late. I didn't lash out. I didn't cry. "Thank you," I said simply. She looked relieved. Not joyful. Just released. She left without asking for anything more. Weeks turned into months. My father never contacted me directly. I heard through the grapevine that he'd sold off one of his last properties, moved into a smaller house with Anthony, and started telling people I had turned corporate, and forgot where I came from. The irony didn't even sting. One day, while checking my business inbox, I noticed a notification from a job application portal we no longer used. It was an old account I hadn't shut down. Someone had applied for an entry-level assistant role. The name? Anthony Caldwell. No resume. Just a note in the cover letter. Willing to learn. Need a fresh start. I closed the tab. Some bridges don't need rebuilding. Just a good burn. But I wasn't cruel. I never exposed him. Never shared the story publicly. Never humiliated them the way they tried to humiliate me. That wasn't strength. That was survival wrapped in vengeance. And I was past that. Instead, I lived. I traveled for the first time in years. Paris, Kyoto, Cape Town. I tried sushi I couldn't pronounce and got lost in a language I didn't speak. I laughed with strangers and danced in hotel rooms and took photos without thinking about who I'd show them to. Freedom is strange when you've been caged for so long. You keep waiting for the door to slam again. But it doesn't. It just stays open. And one day, you walk so far you can't even see the cage anymore. That became my life. I built a home of my own, not just four walls, but a space filled with people who respected me, friends who celebrated wins without jealousy, partners who listened instead of instructing. And every now and then, I'd get a call from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. A cousin. A family friend. They all said the same thing. I heard what happened. I had no idea. But they did. They just didn't want to see it. And that's okay. Because I'm not here to make them see. I'm not here to convince, convert, or compete. I'm here. And that's enough. The last time I drove past my childhood home, it was under renovation. New paint. New windows. New family, probably. I didn't slow down. I didn't even turn my head. Just drove past like it was any other house on any other block. Because it was. My story didn't end with revenge. It ended with release. Not a fiery scream, but a quiet door closing gently behind me. If there's one thing I've learned through this entire experience, it's that blood is not always thicker than self-respect. For most of my life, I believed that loyalty to family was sacred, non-negotiable. I believed that sacrifice was a virtue, and that love meant giving until there was nothing left of me. I tolerated mistreatment, allowed myself to be overlooked, and convinced myself that if I just tried harder, gave more, stayed quieter, it would all be worth it in the end. That somehow, I'd earn a place at the table. But sometimes the table was never built for you. Sometimes, the very people who raised you are the ones who taught you to devalue yourself. And sometimes, walking away isn't weakness, it's the most powerful form of love you can show yourself. I spent years shrinking so others could shine, bending so others could feel comfortable, silencing my own voice to preserve peace that never included me. I told myself I was being strong, mature, selfless. But really, I was afraid. Afraid that if I stopped being the good one, I'd have nothing left. No identity. No place. No worth. But the truth is, we don't owe anyone our silence in exchange for their comfort. We don't owe anyone our peace in exchange for proximity. And we certainly don't owe our lives to people who only see our value when we're convenient. When I walked out of that will reading, I didn't just leave a table, I left a pattern. A cycle of manipulation and selective affection disguised as tradition and family loyalty. I chose myself. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. Because choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. In the aftermath, I realized something else. People don't always change when you confront them. Often they double down. They defend their behavior, rewrite the past, call you dramatic or ungrateful. And when that happens, it's tempting to go back, to explain yourself again, to beg for clarity or closure. But real closure doesn't come from them. It comes when you stop needing their apology to feel free. I used to think justice had to be loud, that it needed a dramatic showdown or public reckoning. But some of the most powerful justice I've ever experienced came in quiet moments. Signing papers that reclaimed what was mine, walking into buildings I owned that they once ignored me in, hearing my name praised in circles they'll never be invited to. Revenge was never the goal. Peace was. And I found it. Not in their regret, but in my own resilience. So if you're someone who's been the fixer, the forgiver, the one who holds it all together while falling apart inside, I see you. I know how heavy that mask can be. I know the fear of letting go, the guilt that creeps in when you consider choosing yourself. But let me say this, you're allowed to be your own hero. You're allowed to draw lines, to say no, to walk away, and most importantly, to thrive without seeking permission. Your worth isn't determined by your ability to endure pain for others. It's revealed when you finally decide you don't have to anymore. So here's to the quiet warriors. The ones who don't scream but survive. The ones who build lives from the ashes of expectation. The ones who walk out of rooms that never saw them, and into futures they built with bare hands and bruised hearts. You are not ungrateful. You are just finally full.